Right now, it's about 10 years on average between when a child first develops a mental health need and when they get help. A lot of people like to, I think, take the easy route and say, well, social media technology is causing all of this.
Anytime you can be really honest and open about the needs of a child, it helps the entire community because then you're not hiding.
How do you see the mental health policy landscape evolving over the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, if you look at the last legislative session for mental health, it was the biggest investment in mental health care by any legislature in history.
Welcome to Learning from Leaders, a podcast from Southwestern Medical Foundation where we dive into a world of wisdom, mentorship, and innovation, exploring the insights and life lessons of seasoned community and business leaders. I'm Michael McMahon, President and CEO of Southwestern Medical Foundation. I invite you to subscribe now and join us on this empowering journey of growth and leadership. Now, let's learn from the best and drive meaningful change together.
Welcome to Learning from Leaders. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Joan Buchanan Hill and Dr. Andy Keller as our guests. Dr. Hill is the esteemed head of school at the Lamplighter School here in Dallas, Texas. With a distinguished career in education, she has been a transformative leader dedicated to fostering innovative teaching practices and enriching the educational experiences of young learners. Dr. Keller is a prominent figure in the field of mental health and the president and CEO of the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. Dr. Keller's extensive expertise and visionary leadership have significantly advanced mental health policy and practice across the nation. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So to get us started, Dr. Hill, I'd love to just learn about your role as head of Lamplighter, what that has entailed, and how you got to where you are.
Okay. Well, I'll start with Lamplighter. Lamplighter has 460 of the most energetic, inquisitive students one could ask for. Lamplighter is pre-K through fourth grade, so we're squarely focused on the education of the youngest learners. My job as head of school is to ensure that the curriculum is up to date and updated. It's to get to know students and families, especially parents, and to provide what I would call an education for every member of the community.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Keller, can you tell us a little bit more about Meadows and your work there?
Sure. The Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, and independent policy and program research institute focused on one thing, which is getting people in Texas, the country, the world, the mental health care that they need. So we really look at that intersection between the programs that can help people and the policies we need to have those programs available to everybody.
Absolutely. And I'd love to learn more about what draw each of you to your field. So Dr. Hill, if you want to start about what really got you excited about education, and Dr. Keller similarly in mental health.
Sure. I became interested in education after working for about 8 years in business. I was in marketing, and I found that work to be very unsatisfying for me, and I wanted a field where I could make a difference. And so I went to grad school, and I found a way to really make a difference, and I have been at 3 other independent schools. All of them have been pre-K-12.
Okay.
And I love the fact that Lamplighter is squarely focused, very focused on the youngest learners. Mm-hmm. But that's what led me to education. I wanted to find a way to make a difference in the lives of children because we have the one opportunity as a career to touch the future in a meaningful way.
Well, you certainly have done so.
Thank you.
And Dr. Keller, how about you with mental health?
Well, so I didn't know that mental health was a career. I was the second person in my family to go to college. My family are all apple growers in Washington State, so I grew up on an apple farm, and my dad had gone to college for farming. And so I didn't really know. I thought, well, you go to college for one or two things. You either go to be a doctor or a lawyer, so I don't really deal with blood very well, so I thought I would be a lawyer. But then I found out about this whole thing of psychology and read about that, and so in college realized that would be a cool thing to do, to be able to help. It's real similar, somewhat similar actually, but helping individuals and their families, and then ended up sort of accidentally getting into policy because you can really then impact a lot of people if you take the things that work for an individual and a family and figure out how to make those available to more people.
Absolutely. And could you talk about how the approach to shaping mental health policy has changed over the last decade or so?
Yeah, well, I think that for a long time, people kind of felt like they had to sort of advocate by focusing on the unmet needs. They would say, well, all these people need things. And one thing we tried to do when we got here was to say, everybody kind of at this point knows that. This is 2013 when we first started our operations, 14 when we ranked up, kind of went up to scale. And we really said we need to focus on solutions. So we would go to the legislature, we would go to county leaders, to hospital leaders and say, hey, you're struggling with these things. If you have questions, we'll help you figure out the things that can work to help people get better. Because I think that's something people don't think about. They think about mental health needs, but they don't realize that we actually have great treatments. 75% of people we can get better within a year, and more people we can get better over time. I mean, there's some folks we can't, but that's true with all sorts of diseases. We still have to work, and that's why we need, UT Southwestern Foundation to be supporting that sort of research. But that's the shift. I think shifting from trying to convince people there was a need to trying to point people to the solutions.
Right. And Dr. Hill, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that are facing students right now? I imagine there may be some overlap here.
Well, there are. We talked about it earlier, and there is some overlap. The three biggest challenges that I've come to realize in my work is the pace and complexity of daily life. I mean, that's a huge challenge for all of us, and for the youngest kids especially. Things move very quickly now, and for children, there's not enough time to really reflect, take stock, and process. So that's one of the challenges. The second is the pressure to have measurable success in some way for little kids. And I was listening to Roger Federer, who did the graduation speech at Dartmouth, and what he said was that 80% of his matches he won, and 54% of those matches, he only got 54% of the points. And what he said is that he learned not how to win, but how to lose. And what happens when you learn how to lose? You have to pick yourself up, you develop resilience, and that's one of the challenges, I think, that students face, developing that resilience so that they learn that things don't always go their way. Things don't always go anyone's way, but what do you do when that happens, and how do you sort of regain your footing? So I think the pressure of daily life, those would be two things. And then anxiety and depression. And we don't see as much of that in little bitties, but at the high school level and middle school level, we know from the press that it's at epidemic levels. So I think those are the three big pressures that we're facing.
Absolutely. And Dr. Keller, how are you all thinking about mental health amongst our kind of younger population, students and our younger learners?
So, well, one of the things we've really tried to help people understand is the mental health needs, mental illnesses are pediatric illnesses. 50% of them start before a person is 14, and 75% have begun by the time your brain stops developing in your mid-20s. So, basically these are childhood disorders. And anxiety is the one that we see the most of, and it's the one that begins earliest. So, that's one you would begin to see the early signs of in elementary school. So we're really trying to help folks recognize the pediatric nature. And then second of all, right now it's about 10 years on average between when a child first develops a mental health need and when they get help. I mean, that's what we used to do for heart. Yeah, I mean, but we've done that for other things, heart disease, cancer. I mean, that's basically the big illnesses we tackle. We begin by diagnosing them when people notice, like when they have chest pains. And so now that's what we do with mental illness. We diagnose it when people are worried. Oh, Andy's going to hurt himself, or Andy's doing poorly in school. What we need to do is move upstream and to recognize the early signs and help parents get help, when a kid's 6, 8, 10, within those first few months of things developing. And then you can focus on the parents. The parents are the most important folks to focus on to help a child.
And what about the role of technology in all of this? I'd love to hear from both of you. Like, what are you hearing? I think we see a lot in the press about some of the negative implications of technology on mental health. What are some ways that perhaps it could be used for good?
Well, one thing I would say is the things that Dr. Hill mentioned, I think, are much more important drivers of needs among children. A lot of people take the easy route and say, well, social media technology is causing all of this. And I think it's the pace of life, the superficial focus on achievement, and that, somehow, some sort of measurable success. I thought you summarized that so well. And I think, too, that parents and family are just they're just not as available because of other pressures as
Right.
they used to be. So I think those are the big things, but technology plays a role. And technology is neutral. I mean, technology is just like anything else. We can use too much of it or we can use too little of it. And I think because it's new, it took us a while to figure out what that is. What's too much, what's too little. And sometimes we swing too hard both ways. I think the things we have to really watch for are just like with any other potent thing in the world, you don't want to let people have exposure to it too soon.
Right.
And you want parental monitoring of that and parental involvement so you can teach a child things. And you can also help them live the rest of their life. But I think the point you made is a really important one, and we can talk more about this, maybe later, but like, there's so much positive connection that can happen through social media. My kids talk to their grandparents way more than they used to. My kids' friends from high school, they were able to stay connected with when they went all over the country to college because of those online resources. So I think if it's seen as a tool that you have to learn how to use and that requires parental supervision to teach a child, then I think that's the approach I would recommend.
Okay, that's so helpful. And Dr. Hill, could you talk about some of the programs and initiatives that Lamplighter is working on or currently implementing around mental health for kids?
Sure. I did want to add, I mean, Andy, Dr. Keller's words were so impactful to me. And we also talked about technology earlier, not being as much of a problem as we need to relearn what it means for humans to be with humans, and not humans with machines, but to read faces, to hear what someone is not saying, to really develop that sense of empathy. So I just wanted to piggyback on what you said because it was so very important.
Absolutely. So I'd love to hear about some of these programs that Lamplighter is working on.
Sure. We have a Parent Perks program, and it offers lots of help for parents across a number of categories. If a student is, or if a parent is worried about sleep or worried about nutrition, we bring in specialists to help them and to talk it out. The job that parents have, and it's a huge job, it's being a parent, and there's no training for it. So we offer twice a year a 6-week parenting course, and it's offered online because we want everyone to have access. So if you can come into school, that's great, but if you can't, it's online. And parents are talking to each other. Again, it's the human with the human. And they're able to express themselves and really unload about their concerns for their children with someone who understands, who's similarly situated, and who really gets it. And I think that's a big program. We also have a very strong social emotional curriculum. So teachers are attuned to student development, child development, and that's another thing that I think if we knew more about the developmental milestones, we wouldn't put quite so much pressure on children because we know what to expect from them. And so the social emotional curriculum, having a Parent Perks program, twice a year we bring in speakers who are just phenomenal. This year we're bringing in Jennifer Wallace, and
wow.
she's coming in September, and she talks about pressure and anxiety and how to really be measured in your parenting style. And then later this year we'll be bringing in Lenore Zielinski, and she did the book years ago called Free Range Kids, and she's going to talk with parents about, relaxing a little bit. Of course, we have parents with very high expectations, and they should because their children are very capable. But how do you modulate that and make it so that it doesn't, so every moment doesn't feel like you're being summed up in some way? Lots of the work at Lamplighter is play-based and project-based, and that helps children be children. So those are the kinds of programs we do at Lamplighter.
That's wonderful. And I'd love to shift to the educator side, because I know we've talked about the community of students and learners and their parents. What about the educators? What can we do to better support our teachers out there from a mental health perspective?
Yes, I think making sure that the schedule gives good breaks in the day, and not so driven. For schools that are heavily reliant on tests, being reasonable about the expectations, getting to know the students helps one to develop a sense of reasonableness because you don't expect from people what they can't do yet. And yet is a big word because they will be able to, it's just not yet. So those are the kinds of things we do for the faculty. Also, lots and lots of professional development, because we're in an age now where learning is the highest currency, and learning is evolving and changing at very high rates. And if we can ensure that our teachers are up to date on what the researchers are saying, and they can apply the latest principles to the students, we find that the full community benefits by extension.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Dr. Keller, could you tell us about some of the programs that Meadows is implementing into schools, both for the students and also, how do we make sure that our educators are well prepared to respond to something going on with a student, perhaps?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, it's very synergistic. We see, the job of schools is to, which Dr. Hill summarized just so well, is to help children develop and to empower parents in that development journey. Really, the mental health component is something to aid in that. When you talk about mental health in schools, it's not to come in there to do mental health. It's to really help children be successful in school. Right. And so there's kind of two focuses of that. One is focusing on supporting that social emotional learning journey that children have. And when I was a kid, they called it character development. This is something that we've always done for children. And a lot of times, it's harder now because people are so fragmented. They don't have family around them. They don't have churches. So we have to find communities to support that. And so schools are one place to do that. So what we try to do is help schools within that think about, there's probably three sets of children in your school. One is, just a child who's on a healthy journey. Another is a child who's at risk of something. And trauma is something, and grief, loss of a parent, loss of a sibling, loss of a friend. Those happen in childhood. We don't like to think about it, but it does affect folks, and they can really knock a child off a healthy trajectory. So kids who are at risk, and then kids who are actually starting to have a mental health need. And we want to make sure the school has the ability to get the family help at any one of those points. So if you actually need a mental health need, to support parents to get that. So that's one thing. The second thing we do, and by the way, that looks different in every school building. There's 1,200 local education agencies in Texas, school districts, and then thousands of more independent schools, and then tens of thousands of school buildings. Every one of those buildings is going to do things different. So you have to really meet schools with the resources they have and the approach they have, because there's lots of good ways to do it. But the second thing is, when a child needs, there's not great access to mental health care, and also people don't know where to go. The best place to go is your family doctor, but a lot of times people don't know that, and also sometimes if we waited a while, it's more serious. So we help set up a program with all of the medical schools in Texas, the 12 state-funded medical schools, they set up the Texas Child Mental Health Consortium.
Okay.
Mental Health Care Consortium. And so the consortium offers supports to pediatricians so they can get their questions answered, but it also offers same-time, real-time telehealth access to any school in Texas that wants it for children that have urgent needs. Okay. So if I come to school and they're worried about little Andy, they're going to call my parents. They're going to say, hey, would you like Andy to talk to somebody? Can y'all come in? We can beam you in from your house, it'd be telehealth. And so you can talk to a child psychiatrist that day. So that way if a child, and that way we take it off the teacher, because teachers are often the first people to see things. And if that burden's on them and they don't have someone to help, they need to focus on the education. They need to not be mini therapists. So it's, and I think that ultimately is a help to teachers if they know that they can have support for their children who they see hurting, because that's a burden for them. They care deeply. They're with that child, 5 days a week. That's one of the biggest things, in addition to what Dr. Hill was describing. And I think the last thing is we try to involve the teachers in the curricula, particularly when we do things around trauma and grief, because a lot of times as adults, we didn't get really good advice on that. We were told to just pretend that didn't happen, or just, move on, and that can help. moving on is something you do need to do, but a lot of times we find that adults in general, that includes teachers and parents and administrators and staff in the schools, have their own traumas and losses. So it's hard to help someone else with their supports if you're not getting the help you need. And that's why it's important for schools and everybody to have really good health benefits and make sure that mental health care is part of their benefits so that when you have that medical need, you can get it met. So that's kind of across the board the things we try to work on.
Okay. And it seems to me that we've found a place in society in which I think there's perhaps more openness than ever about mental health. At Lamplighter, is that something that has kind of helped in the mission to provide more support to students?
I think anytime you can be really honest and open about the needs of a child, whether they're mental or physical or emotional, it helps the entire community, because then you're not hiding. As Dr. Keller said, you really have to deal with things in a very reasonable and realistic manner. And I found, to the extent that we can tackle issues of mental health openly and honestly and frame it in a way that's appropriate for the institution and for the situation, we're better. I think students are better, and families, by extension, are better, and it helps our teachers.
Absolutely. What about you, Dr. Keller? Have you seen that openness lead to perhaps a momentum and policy change?
Absolutely. And I think it's happened over the last, it continues to happen, I guess. And it's very different than it was. And I think, to me, the main problem with not being able to be open is that people are alone.
Right.
Kids are alone, parents are alone, teachers are alone, struggling with things that they feel overwhelmed by. And I think, I really feel like we were so fortunate when we started in 2014. Advocates for years have been helping support this and promote this. And so the legislature, the leaders in the state, came in with a belief that mental health was something that people could be helped by. So I think there was such a foundation to build on. And then by focusing on solutions, because I've heard folks when they say who have struggled with mental illness and feelings of, should I tell people or not? They don't talk so much in terms of stigma. What they talk about is, why would I mention something this sensitive if no one's going to help me? Like, why would I share all this because it's painful to share,
right,
if I'm not going to get help? And I think helping people understand that help is there, and that even if we can't get you help the first time, we're going to be standing by you and standing by your child, and just like you would with any illness. Cancer, people used to not want to talk about cancer. When Betty Ford in the 70s, which you probably don't remember. I don't remember. I was only 9. But my first boss, Tom Luce, told me a lot about this. And Tom talked about how in 1974, when she came out and talked about her breast cancer, that this was a huge thing because people didn't use the B word or the C word in public, back in 74. And so that recognition that you could get help, I think, is a huge thing. And then the other one, though, that I think was a real watershed was the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I think people recognized during the pandemic, they saw their own mental health, their own, consumption of substances change, and the people around them. And so it was so striking when we first came back to the legislative session in 2021, the hearings, it was just like, it was a different group of people. The same legislators. And I feel like people were kind of more emotionally just kind of present, like they'd lived through something and they saw their kids go through it. And it did make some things worse. That isolation, the losses, the grief, it was a very difficult time for our country. And so I think anybody who didn't believe in mental health before the pandemic was a believer afterwards.
Right,
And so
right.
I think those were big
so.
things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How do you see the mental health policy landscape evolving over the next 10, 20 years? And I'm curious about how you would answer that for our nation and also for Texas specifically.
Yeah, it's a great question. One thing that's cool, and it does seem to be true on a national level and on a state level within Texas, is that it's a very bipartisan issue. If you look at the last legislative session, it was a very tough session. There's a lot of acrimony over issues that I unfortunately don't need to worry about or get into. But for mental health, it was the biggest investment in mental health care by any legislature in history. Billions of dollars to construct new facilities, to fund services in schools, to make the school services I talked about before available to every Texas school child, all 5.4 million of them. So it's something that there's huge bipartisan consensus on. And that's also true at the national level. If you look at the signature achievements of the Biden administration, the one that probably stands out the most and that people talk about once you got past those initial COVID ones was the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Some people refer to it as the gun bill that happened after the Uvalde tragedy. But really, that was a huge mental health bill, over $10 billion of mental health funding. And Senator Cornyn was the ranking member. Actually, it was, I think they had the Senate back then. Yeah, so he was the lead. And then Senator Murphy from Connecticut came together and worked in a very bipartisan way, and we worked very closely supporting Senator Cornyn's office and supporting that process. So that's the coolest thing. That's bipartisan. I think that is something that I hope continues because I think because these are bipartisan issues. They're things that affect folks. I do worry sometimes that the narrative can kind of get ahead of parents. I think it's really important that when we look at the mental health needs of children, we are always focused on parents.
Right.
Because if you don't have parents on board, these are medical procedures. Parents have to provide their consent, and we really need to involve them. And most parents are going to want to do that. And ones who won't, we have other supports we can offer them. And I think probably the last thing I would say is I'm excited because I think what we're finally seeing is a recognition that we have to recognize these things earlier. So I was at a primary care appointment a few weeks ago and was thrilled that they asked me about depression. And they didn't just ask me, are you depressed? Which is what they used to do. And I'd be like, how would I know?
Right,
like, well, you're
right.
a psychologist. I'm like, well, how would I know if I'm depressed? Like, I could tell if you're depressed. But and so they have these standardized protocols now that they use that basically can identify all cases of depression and anxiety unless the person's lying. And some people do lie, like if you're a police officer, if you're in the military, a lot of times you feel pressure for your career to not disclose these things. So we have worked, with the Dallas Police, with others, through the Caruth Police Institute, actually, which is a wonderful institution here in Dallas, to create anonymous ways for that to happen. So there's a blue chip program that we've set up here in Dallas and helped implement, and the Caruth Foundation, Communities Foundation of Texas, has supported that. And what it does is they give officers a blue chip that they can take to any of hundreds of therapists to get a free session, and they don't have to tell anybody about that. So I think that sort of early access, empowering people to get care, Texas is leading on it. It's pretty exciting to see that progress being emulated in other places.
Absolutely. So I think, as you all know, a lot of our audience on this podcast is the next generation of leaders who are very excited to hear the philosophies on leadership of extraordinary leaders like yourselves. Both of you have been so instrumental in your respective fields and obviously as leaders in our community here in Dallas. So we'd love to hear from each of you what have been the most essential leadership qualities that you've tried to enact in your respective roles. Dr. Hill, will you please start?
Yeah, of course. I think the three most important qualities that a leader has to have is patience, a willingness. The second is a willingness to collaborate with others and to work together, because the best of us is when all of us are part of it. And being able to, of course, communicate in a way that allows people to hear what you have to say, but also for you to be open to the viewpoints of others. And I think leaders who are patient with the process, they're a little bit curious about what are the possibilities. They communicate well and are open-minded, and they're willing to work with other people. They tend to be people who are learners and who are successful in some way in their chosen field.
So that's a great description. I think those are all really important parts that have impacted me. I think, another one I would share is I think a lot of times leaders don't think of themselves as leaders, the best leaders. I think they think of themselves as people who want to take responsibility. They want to help make things better. They want to help other people do that. They want to empower other people to do that. I think to me, a leader is someone who is first a helper, a servant, someone who cares about responsibility. And then I think you become a leader by doing a good job with that. If you're doing a good job, you're entrusted with more responsibility. And that's where I think you need to make the shift, though, to recognize that, and I love how Dr. Hill talked about this, that you have to lead with other people. You need to be a leader of leaders. You have to be able to work. And that's a hard shift. I mean, I think actually there's a really good, the Michael Jordan documentary that came out a couple of years ago about his transformation. When he was just like the best basketball player in the world, he's certainly a leader on that team, but he was really the one doing it all.
Right.
And that shift, when they went to, after Phil Jackson got there, and the shift to where, he's still Michael, but like where, you've got a team there that you can count on. And I think learning how to have teams, and that was something that I wouldn't have learned about if not for the last thing, which I would emphasize in leadership, is mentors. Mm-hmm. You have to have other leaders kind of take you by the hand, because, what you see on TV, what you think of yourself, you're not going to know that. And so, my father-in-law, for example, was a great mentor to me in leading. And he, early in my career talked to me about teams. And I just hadn't really thought about that construct. So there's things that you wouldn't know. And if you don't have somebody who is leading to kind of be there as a mentor and a support, then I think it's hard to learn that stuff on your own.
Right.
Dr. Keller, I think you are so right. And when I think about people who mentored me at the very beginning, someone who showed, this is the way you set this up. This is the way you get people to attend. This is the way you get people to join, because you don't know that on your own, and you can't operate as a silo. In fact, that's the very opposite of leadership. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's really true. Yes.
It was one of my favorite things actually about coming to Texas were some of the mentors I got to have here. I mean, Tom Luce is just an amazing one. It was such an honor to work with him. But I think this is a really neat community that values mentoring. I mean, just the fact that you're doing something on leadership like this. And I think it's one of my favorite parts about especially North Texas.
Absolutely. Well, I think it is a community that's very open with talking about their learnings and how they've dealt with various leadership challenges and accomplishments and all of that. So it feels so lucky to be in a community that is so open about that and willing to offer their expertise. Could both of you talk about how you have navigated some of the more difficult challenges in your roles as leaders in your respective fields?
Well, I think one of the hardest things as a leader is how do you deal with somebody who needs to have a different job? Because not everybody is a great fit ultimately in the mission you have, or the mission organization can change. And that's super hard. I remember the first time I had to do that, to let someone go. It was really, I hated it. And but you do it, right? Because you need to do that for actually, what I found is it's actually really good for that individual, because if someone's in a job where they're just not performing, if you can do that humanely and compassionately, it's good for them as well. But, I had a mentor at the time who said, this is really hard, isn't it? I said, yeah. She goes, it should always be hard. Because if this isn't hard, then you really don't understand how important it is for someone to have a job and a livelihood. So I think that was so helpful to have her do that. And so, just accepting that this is hard and being able to lean into that and try to be a support to that person. Because those sorts of that can help a person then move on to what they're doing. And that doesn't mean that's the last straw. I mean, you don't go to that too quickly. I mean, I think that's the other thing you have to learn as a leader is that they're not making excess humans. I mean,
Right.
We got the humans we got. And so we really have to help people grow and find ways to create, to meet them, because we just don't have enough of us. And so we need to be able to create that. That's probably one of the biggest ones, I think. I mean, there's others, but.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Also, keeping momentum going within your organization. That always is something that you have to think about, because we're not AI bots, we're individuals and humans, and people move at different paces, and they have different strengths and different weaknesses. And if you can keep your organization in some sort of forward movement, considering all of that, that's been, I think, of all the challenges that I've had, that's the number one. And trying to make sure that you step away from any inertia within yourself and within others, keeping that positive attitude, keeping things moving in a positive way, and you bring the community along, and it creates excitement. But it's not lost on me that is something that's, always in the offing that you have to be aware of as a leader, that you've got your momentum, you've got to keep that trajectory moving forward. And you have to be open to hearing lots of voices and then be willing to make the decision. Like you said, Dr. Keller, some decisions that leaders have to make are tough. They're gut-wrenching. If a school, for example, is not the right fit for a child. That there's no harder day than that, because parents send the very best children they have. They don't leave the good ones at home. And it's up to us to try to deal with that as sensitively and as compassionately, especially when things aren't necessarily working out yet. But they will eventually.
Keyword yet.
Yes.
I love that frame. And I think, recognizing that if you really focus on those moments, like, it can be transformative for that individual and for yourself. Like, I mean, if you can recognize that it's a crossroads, that it's not just about getting that person to go somewhere else. It's about helping that transition be really good, because you can actually really empower a person to get on a different trajectory. Right. And that comes back. I mean, it's a good thing to do just for the world and for humans, but like, you're going to see people later. People come back. I mean, I've had people leave the organization and come back later. I mean, you just got to recognize the world is a small world, and we all need to be there for each other. And, I mean, I'm not saying I've always done a perfect job of that. I mean, you've had to learn that. I do a better job of that now than I did 15 years ago. But I think, those are important leadership moments, those hard times, those difficult times when your budgets, didn't come in the way you want. You'll have to all figure out how you're going to deal with that. Those are hard things, but I think that's really what that defines your leadership. I think those are the challenges.
Absolutely. What would you all say to the next generation of leaders who is eager to really get involved in the worlds of mental health and education?
Well, I would tell them one of the things you said earlier, which is patience. I think one side effect of how we've been raising children these days is like, people come out of college ready to lead. And why am I not in charge of this? And it's like, because you're 12. It's like because there's you need to like do some things first. And it doesn't mean you should, but I mean, I do feel like I spend quite a bit of time with younger folks really trying to help them be patient about things, and to see that the opportunity in front of them is an important one, and you're going to learn things through that transition up, through successive responsibility, and to really focus on just doing your job well. So, I mean, that's, I think, one of the biggest things. And then the second thing that is actually way easier to tell people now than it was is, don't be afraid to do informational interviewing. My wife actually told me about this. This was not something I'd heard about on my apple farm. But that if there's a job you're interested in, find a person who's doing it and ask them if you can talk to them for 10 or 15 minutes about it. And people love talking about themselves. Like, people, like, you think, oh no, they're too busy. Like, no, they will love it. Especially if you're flexible and it's 10 or 15 minutes, you're not asking for a job. You're there to just understand, and you've prepared some questions, and then you let them talk. You'll learn so much. And I think, watching my kids both do that, they learned about jobs they didn't want to have. They thought this sounded cool. And then they went and talked to people, and like, I don't want to do that every day. And so I think those patience and informational interviewing would be probably two big things I would emphasize.
Absolutely.
And trying things.
Yeah.
I encourage people who are in grad school and want to go into the field of education, try things, try different grades, try different disciplines. Just try lots of things, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you get out and try it and give it a go, then you have, I think you said about the informational interviews, you have firsthand knowledge about what works for you and maybe what doesn't, but you've got to have the ability and the willingness to try. And I think that's the biggest advice that I would give.
I love that so much, because I think it is trying work. One thing I think we don't do enough is encourage children or young people to get jobs. We're very into skill acquisition, and we're very into like getting better at sport. We're getting better at whatever activity, you have chosen. But, I don't think we're encouraging as many young people to get jobs. And I think, that after school job, the jobs in the summer, the job during break. I mean, the other activities are cool, and it's not about not doing those things, but it's also to think about employment for young people, because I think taking responsibility and learning how to have responsibility and learning how to deal with things you don't really know how to know about, it's so empowering to have that. So I think trying a bunch of jobs.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
Yeah.
So each of you have had very extraordinary careers. What are you most proud of?
Oh gosh. I think I'm most proud of my own children and being a mom to them. and going through the seasons of their lives when things weren't all buttoned up. And through that, I learned more about myself and how to help people in my schools. And I think that's what I'm most proud of. Now, if I think about my school only, what I'm most proud of is the ability to be open to what's new and not to be afraid, which will make you say no. And I like to say yes a lot, even when I'm not 100% sure. Because I think if you can have the mindset of an anthropologist, somebody who just wants to learn a lot of things, you can help a lot of people and you open up windows for yourself. So those would be my things.
I want to steal Dr. Hill's answers. Because it's an interesting question. I mean, I often, my first reaction when people ask me that is, I don't think about it that way. Like, I feel grateful for the opportunities I've had, and I think they're cool, but I think, I don't know, it's probably too much religious training around falls and whatnot, and all that kind of stuff. But I think, it's true. Like, the thing that I'm most satisfied about and thankful and feel the best about is being a dad. I mean, and I think a lot of times as a leader, you're not encouraged to think about the rest of life. And I'm so fortunate that I had a business partner early on who really pushed me to do that in my first leadership job. And, and it's what I wanted to do, but like sometimes, that choice between do you spend another hour at work, helping your team, or do you spend that hour, being with your kids? I would just say, like, you're never going to regret the decisions to go hang out with your kids because you only get them for a little bit of time. And even if, you don't have children, your nieces, nephews, there's children in your life. And I think, and people have other non-work things. And I think the best leaders, or the happiest leaders, maybe I put it that way, are the ones who think about that. And it's 100% true. Like, being a dad's way more important than anything else I've done. At work, when I feel pride, it's when I see my teammates, the fellow leaders in the organization, new folks in the organization, interns, do something and feel proud of it and be, I love your word, brave enough to like say, yeah, I'll do that. Because we do a lot of things where we're pushing the boundaries, where, no one thought we were going to have mental health services available to every child in a Texas school. Like, that was not anybody's plan 10 years ago when we started. And if you said we're going to do that, people said, no way we're going to be able to do that. Well, you do that by being able to step up when people have needs and saying there are solutions and we'll help you figure that out, and saying yes, like you said, and being brave enough to say yes. And so when I see people on my team do that, I love that. It just makes my heart swell, because that's who gets things done. As a leader, you're really not really getting many things done other than empowering other people to get things done.
Well said. So there's one question that we asked to all of our guests, and Dr. Keller, you spoke so eloquently about just the important role of having mentors in your life. So my question to each of you is, who has been a mentor in your lives that have really helped to shape how you think about leadership? Dr. Hill, do you want to start?
Shall I go first? Sure. As I think about, there are three people who have really helped to shape my leadership journey. When I started in the profession of education, I was a kindergarten teacher, and I worked with a woman named Linda McDonald, and she was a taskmaster. She wanted everything just right. And I learned from her the importance of some things needing to be exact. It wasn't good enough. It needed to be just so. And I count her, and there were so many frustrating days. Honestly, I mean, many days we were done. But now in retrospect, I learned so much from her. And then the second person is a Dallasite, Liza Lee, who worked at one of my former schools. And I learned from her the importance of being joyful every day. I mean, no matter what happens, Dr. Keller, you spoke about being grateful and having that sense of gratitude and joy. So yes, things need to be exacting according to Linda McDonald, but you also need to find joy in your work, and you need to have happy days, and you need to make sure you're smiling every day and greeting people in that way. And then the third person I would count as a mentor is a person that taught me the business side of my work, and that was not a strength for me. And this person encouraged me. He was very patient and thoughtful, but determined. He was a combination of Liza Lee and Linda McDonald. You're going to learn this, and you're going to get really good at it. And I'm forever grateful for his mentorship. And Lily, you bring this up, and I haven't had a chance to tell them. And so now through this conversation, I know that I need to go back and say thank you to these people that meant so much in my journey that I never stopped to talk about anything like this or say thank you.
That's so important. Well, I've mentioned a couple folks, and I'll just mention again. I mean, Tom Luce is an amazing Texan, and it was such an honor to get to work with him, as my boss when the Meadows Institute started. And Tom, really taught me to be concise. He never taught me to be on time. There's no way to beat him on being on time, but like to really be able to say things clearly and to use as few words as possible, which I haven't mastered, but like I'm trying hard. And also I think really to be optimistic about the potential of people to rise to the occasion and make things happen. But if I go back, I really think my mom and dad probably did the most. Like my mom, I think in terms of shaping me as a person and, my emotional development, my kind of confidence, just helped me a lot with my school. But my dad is a business leader. Watching him, lead our family business, watching, his farming, doesn't always work out super well. And watching him particularly in moments of adversity, that reveal character, that reveal, a sense of, finding momentum, finding ways to still move forward, continuing to be kind of project that optimistic energy even when it's not something you may feel on a given day. And I think you can't do that. He couldn't have done that, and I couldn't have done that without faith. And I think, seeing him as a man of faith that was most revealed in those moments when things didn't work out. Like you said earlier with the Roger Federer's example of learning how to lose, learning how to deal with humiliation, learning how to deal with things, the 10th thing you tried not going the way you expected, but trying an 11th thing and finding that. And, my dad did that. And I think he conveyed this sense that not that you would always be successful, but that if you remain faithful in your efforts, you're going to be okay. And kind of God's going to take care of the rest. And I think that example has been probably, nothing more powerful, nothing more important to me than that. So
Absolutely. Well, I'll say one side note about Tom Luce, because as you know, I have the incredible privilege of getting to work with him for the last couple of years and certainly resonate with everything that you said. He's just really, really extraordinary as a mentor and as a leader in our state. So to wrap things up, we have a quick round of rapid fire questions for each of you. So each of you will answer. Dr. Keller, do you want to go first?
Sure.
And Dr. Hill second?
Okay.
Okay, so these are just quick 1 to 2 word answers. So the first is, who is a musician or a band that you're currently listening to?
Zach Bryan,
Oh, so good.
who's like 28, but he's like a genius. Sorry. Yeah, Zach Bryan.
Dr. Hill?
Oh, gosh, I'm caught flat-footed. Now I'm trying to think. I can't think of anybody right now.
You should listen to Zach Bryan.
I should listen. Okay, I'm going to listen.
It's a good choice.
Okay,
It's a good choice.
all right.
Okay, what is the best book that you've read in the past year?
I've got one. How to be seen and how to see others. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, oh gosh. It's a Haruki Murakami book, and I'm trying to remember the name. The Commendator. It was a great book, and it's just amazing, and he writes so powerfully.
What is a TV show that you all are currently watching and recommend?
Well, so I just recently had a medical procedure, so I had to stay home for a few days. So first of all, so glad the Olympics was on. But there's a really cool show called CB Strike,
Okay.
which is on Prime, and it's like this British detective duo, super cool, really well done.
I have been hooked on the Olympics since day one.
Oh, same
and
here.
that has been taking every waking moment that I'm at home. I turn on the Olympics and to see how our medal count is and who's out having fun and living their best lives.
Is there a specific sport you've been most excited
Well,
about?
I love the swimming. I love gymnastics. And track and field, they just can go forever, it seems. They just, yeah.
Is there a sport you've been watching in particular, Dr. Keller?
Well, those are the ones. I would kind of whatever's on. I mean, it's just great to watch the women's soccer team win today, which was cool. Sorry, spoiler if you haven't seen it yet. It just happened. And actually, really cool yesterday, the pole vaulter guy.
Oh, I saw that.
Like the Swedish guy who got the new
Yes.
pole vaulting record. I was just like, which I've not been a big follower of pole
No.
vaulting. I kind of remember occasionally that it's a sport, but it was awesome. Like just watching him do that, and it's so neat to see. Anyway, yeah.
It's almost an art
Yeah.
to watch how they,
Yeah.
get over the top.
This is, I'll continue with the rapid fire in a minute.
Yes, okay.
But did you all see the photo of Simone Biles and Jordan Childs just paying tribute to Rebecca Andrade?
Yes.
She's incredible. She's the gold medalist on floor.
I don't know if I saw the. Oh, was that when they got down?
Yes,
I saw that.
incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
It just
I
reminded
saw
me
that.
of
It was
y'all's
so
comments
cool.
about just lifting up other leaders around you. It's an incredible photo.
I love the camaraderie among. I mean, who knows? Like, we don't get to see everything, but like being able, the snippets we saw, like it's whatever is going on there, it's super cool. The way they were
That's
interacting with each other.
right. And I'm seeing that with all the athletes. They're willing each other to do their very best. And it really shows the best of humanity, I think, watching the Olympics. It's been great.
It's cool.
Okay, back to the rapid fire.
Okay.
Best Dallas restaurant.
Oh, I am such a foodie. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, like go. I mean, there's so many. Like there's so many good Dallas restaurants. But like for family, we love to go to Farian's at
Yeah.
the Ritz-Carlton. And also like Paul the sommelier there, like he'll find you like a $40 bottle of wine that you'll think, you could have spent way more on. I mean, yeah, I would, and it's like, and it's a fancy hotel. Like I was like, why are we going there? But I was like, it is a great place for family things. It's a really cool.
And I love the Mercury.
Mercury's
Oh,
fantastic.
that's a good spot.
I love the Mercury.
It's a good spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should
Okay.
open City Cafe back up too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Missed that. But yeah,
That was so good.
City Cafe to go might be one of my favorites.
yeah.
It's really good. What is you all's favorite weekend activity in Dallas?
Oh, I love to ride my bike. If I have time just to ride my bike around my neighborhood, that's a good day for me. But weekend activities outside of that, I love catching movies. And that's always fun for us to go and sit down and relax and watch a movie. Hanging out at Clyde Warren Park is so fun to be outside. And so those are weekend activities that I enjoy. Going to the Perot, yes.
So I've found that I'm kind of more of an indoor cat on the weekends. So like I like enjoying the air conditioning I have and watching shows. And
That sounds nice,
I just
too.
want to chill out.
Do you TiVo your shows and watch them on the weekend?
No, like now we've got the whole sort of thing. You can just watch whatever you want, whenever you want.
yeah,
Yeah, like it's just like whatever's on, you can watch. And so like as a psychologist, I probably should have a better answer, but like I feel TV in moderation is fine.
I think TV in moderation is more than fine. But every now and then, ride that bike.
It's all about the balance.
It's hard in August.
Yeah, true.
I know, it's true.
Okay, so I've been so excited to specifically ask the two of you this question. Have you seen Inside Out 2?
No, I
Or
didn't.
Inside Out 1?
Yes, Inside Out 1.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Dr. Hill.
And Despicable Me 3. I saw that
Okay,
one.
so my question for you,
I know.
Dr. Hill,
That's good.
is
Go
do you have a favorite character from Inside Out?
Oh, gosh. The one that's in the red.
Anger?
Sometimes anger gets me. Yeah, like that one. Then I like the yellow, the one in the yellow.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and Dr. Keller, I'm putting a pin in that question. So
Good,
then
so I
when
can
you
see
see it, report back.
I will
I'm
let you
eager
know.
to know
Absolutely.
who you
See, I'd
decide
love
on.
to know what you think about anger.
I will. It's too much like work. So I'm very escapist in my TV shows.
I
That's the-
understand.
yeah.
And if you need a child to go along with you because these are PG, you let me know. We've got lots of
You
children
got
who
children
would
who
be
go, okay.
happy to
That's
go.
good. That's good. I will, but I will put that on the list and I will let you know.
Okay. Well, I have one more question for you two, which is we've talked a lot about many pressing issues today. What are you most optimistic about?
Oh gosh, the future. I have 460 fabulous kids in my school, and I know that our future is in good hands. They're inquisitive, they're thoughtful, they're kind. We're in good shape. Some days it may not look like it, but we are in good shape. Very optimistic about the future.
Yeah. So do people your age, people in their 20s, I am so love working with. And I mean, yeah, you got to tell them to kind of be patient, but that's great. I mean, like, how cool is that? You have to
that's
restrain
right.
people's
Yes,
enthusiasm.
that's right.
And I'm super optimistic about that. I feel like, people my age and older, like, we need y'all to like be doing more. And I'm very optimistic about that. I'm glad to do my part. But like, the thing that makes me the most optimistic are people in their 20s. I feel like there's a community spirit, an optimism, ability to talk about themselves and their feelings that like I didn't have.
No.
That's probably what makes me most optimistic. And I would say that even if you were my age, I would have said, because it's true.
And they're joyful.
Yeah.
They really have. We had the last couple of days, the last 2 days, we've had all the new faculty come in, and they're so happy, and they're everything, Dr. Keller, that you described. So, yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, to both of you, thank you so much. We're so, so grateful at the opportunity to speak with you today and learn from you. We appreciate all of your leadership in our city and our country. Just thank you so much for joining us on Learning from Leaders.
Well, it's great to get to be together and meet each
How
other.
about that?
Yeah, that was
Yes,
super fun.
so good.
Yeah,
And
there's
Lily,
yeah,
thank
Lily.
you.
Yeah, thank you
for having us.
Glad to have you all.
Being such a great conversationalist. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Learning from Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to subscribe now for monthly episode drops so that you can continue to learn from experienced business and community leaders to help you drive meaningful change in your community.